morning, it's Sunday, November the 6th, and welcome back to the shop. I'm in a t-shirt because it is 17 degrees out, and that is about 68 degrees Fahrenheit for my American friends, so it's a gorgeous day. Now, why am I making this video? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Well, there's three reasons in total. Number one, yesterday, out for a drive in the 68, and this happened. As you can see, the power steering hose literally blew right out of the connector. And that ended up throwing power steering fluid all over my hot exhaust, and the car actually started on fire. So, lesson one, always have a fire extinguisher with you, all right? Now, the good news is it only burned because it was literally that hot. It was on the exhaust manifold, so it went out instantly. But I would hate to have had this escalate into anything worse. So no damage to the car other than a blown hose. Now, what am I complaining about? Well, this is a brand new hose. Now, there were two available from CJ Pony. The one that I bought, and then of course the other one, which was more of a concourse hose, and it was more expensive. And again, I thought, what's the difference? I'm not going for judging. Who cares? Well, who cares is the fact that the hose blew out. So buy that more expensive hose if you're going to be buying a new power steering pressure side hose. So that's number one. Number two is my F-150. It is 2 years old. I took it in for an oil change, and they told me I needed rear brakes. And I thought, what do you mean I need rear brakes? Front brakes are always the one that burns out first, right? Well, not in a Ford F-150. It turns out that the rear braking mechanism is used for sway control, it's used for traction control, it's used for stability control. So in fact, on a windy day with nothing connected to your truck, if the wind starts to move the truck around a little bit, like gusts of wind, the truck will actually apply the rear brakes in order to stabilize the vehicle. Well, it'll do that when it's windy, it'll do that when you're towing, it'll do that when you step on the gas on loose gravel. It's going to apply the brakes. Now, the bad part is these are the brakes. As you can see, the pad is relatively large, but the contact surface of the brake is actually quite small. So my rear brakes were burned right out to steel, and that's 60,000 kilometers, which is outrageous. I mean, it should never be close to that. So I had to do a brake job on the F-150. Now, after I did the brake job on the F-150, of course, everything was back to normal again. But now it looks like I'm going to have to change the rear brakes on an F-150 twice as often as the front, which is totally backwards to what normal convention would be for brakes. So that's number two. Quality parts on my hose, quality parts for the rear brakes on the Ford. I mean, Ford could make that pad, the whole section would be brake, which would then wear slower. They could do that. Or they could make posi traction and availability for the F-150. Now, why do I know this truck does not have posi traction? Because of this video here. As you can see, if one wheel spins in one direction, the other wheel spins in the other, which means it's not posi traction. So if they would simply put posi traction in, you wouldn't need to use the rear brakes then for traction control and mostly for stability. Because when you have both rear wheels driving the vehicle, that automatically stabilizes the truck. If you have both rear wheels driving the vehicle, when you're on gravel, both wheels will spin. You don't need to use the brakes. So for me, it's almost like Ford said, you know what, we're going to save money. We don't have to put posi in. And we're going to put that cost on the shoulders of our buyers, because now I'm responsible for a brake job every 40,000 kilometers on the rear of this truck. Well, let's get to the meat and potatoes of this video. Basically, the Mustang's done for the year, right? I can't drive it anymore. Power steering line is blown off. What I did is I took the fan belt off, obviously, and that way there is no longer driving the pump, and that way I could drive it home because it blew out on me about an hour and a half away from my house. Now that it's going to be in the garage for the rest of the winter, what are we going to be doing to it? Well, remember I made a list of the things we need to get done to this car. The auto fog interior lights. Remember we had the system where I could remote and I would unlock the car and the interior lights would come on and the fog lights would come on. It started misbehaving. I started having an issue where I would have the car closed and the ignition on, and yet the interior lights were still on, and they shouldn't have been that way. So something was malfunctioning. Well, the last thing you want is an electrical malfunction on a 50-year-old car. So I actually removed all that. I took all of that out. Now the car, you unlock it, you open the door, the lights come on, you close the door, the lights go out. I think I went a little overboard for a 50-year-old car. Headlight aim and dimmer switch. I finally was able to take the headlight assemblies apart and actually drop the headlights. A lot of people were complaining when I was driving. They were flashing me my high beams saying, hey, you got your high beams on. I didn't, but it turned out I did have an alignment issue. So they don't align very well. What I ended up having to do is putting a washer in front of the lower alignment screw to actually drive the entire assembly even lower than normal. Now, I don't know why it's so high. The fenders are aligned. Something must be out of alignment somewhere, but basically I was able to get those headlights dropped another 3 inches, so I have no complaints. Dimmer switch kept on sticking, and the reasoning is I had bought one of those beautiful little black things that go onto the carpet that dress it up. Well, that thing is designed perfectly to get underneath the lip of the dimmer and lock it out. You can't hit your dimmer switch, so I've just removed it. Interior rattles, I haven't gotten to that yet. You see there's no green check mark. The rear panels are rattling, and that is just because they're old. I'm gonna get some foam tape and literally just put foam tape, wrap it around all the contact points. That should shut it up. That's my winter project. Alternator slip, we dealt with that in the previous video. We put the dual pulleys on that thing, and it works beautifully. I don't hear any screeching whatsoever. Clutch pedal's a little weird still. It keeps on, you can feel the springs once in a while. And that's the Z-bar. I gotta adjust that Z-bar, make it flat. That should take care of it. The hood turn signals. So, as I mentioned earlier in another video, this car has really seen a rough life. And people were sitting on this hood. It took me forever to straighten this hood out. Well, without realizing it, people were also sitting on the inserts, which are for the hood-mounted signal lights, and those are bent down. So when I'm driving the car, I can barely see the indicators on the hood because they are bent down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to order new ones, and I'm going to replace these. And again, so that's something I'm going to be doing, so there'll be a video on me getting those in, painting them, etc. The rear end ratio, as we know now, this car comes with a 279 rear end open. So it's not a posi, it's not a track lock, it's simply a 279. With a 3-speed automatic, the 279 made sense so that when you were on the highway, you would keep the RPMs under 3,000 RPM. But the problem is now I've got 5 gears on this manual with a 0.68 overdrive. So this 279 is really too big for this car. And in fact, even at highway speed, 70 miles an hour, I put this car into 5th gear, RPMs drop to about 1,500 RPM, which is just too low. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a set of 3 1/4. Now, what'll that do? That's going to obviously increase the ability for this car to hold shot. And at the second time, then it'll make it a little bit more fun to drive, right? Because, you know, it'll be a little bit peppier. And the overdrive now and the 5 gears on the transmission, I shouldn't have any highway speed issues. My tachometer is too bright. We all know I put a 2-inch tachometer where my clock space was. Remember, I had no clock in this dash, so I just put a 2-inch tachometer. Its internal LED light is really bright, and the rest of the dash is normal, and the LED is really bright. So I'm gonna have to take it apart, probably put a resistor in series with the LED bulb in order to bring that down. The headrests on this car, because I had built the seats out away from the headrests. Remember, the original seats were from an MKX Lincoln. So you were more into the seats with bolstering. Of course, with these seats, you're further out. My head is too far away from the headrest. So simple fix. The metal supports for the headrest, I'll just bend them, so that'll just bring the headrest forward. Again, that'll be in another video. My brake pedal. It's one of those funny things where this car stops on a dime. I just push that brake pedal and it stops on a dime. But one of the funny things about it is that I can actually feel the brake pedal getting to the point where I could not physically press it any further. Now, it doesn't matter. I mean, by that time, the wheels are locked up almost. But that's just not right. There's something wrong. Either the piston travel inside of my master cylinder is not adjusted correctly, but there's something not right. So I'll make a video on that. Maybe I need to adjust the master cylinder push rod and also the brake booster push rod and see whether or not there's a an alignment issue there. So that's the next thing. E-brake adjustment. My e-brake works great, but again, e-brake is all the way out to the point where it can't go anymore and the brakes are on, but again, it should be engaging about 3/4 of the way so that you always have room in case there's a problem. And lifter adjust. I've noticed a slight little tick, tick, tick. Now that could be anything. Now, my concern, of course, is that a lifter failure? Or is that simply that, the car engine was rebuilt this year, first time running, adjusting the lifters is something that once everything's broken in, you probably have to go back and readjust the lifters. And in a car like this, which is hydraulic lifters, it's a fairly straightforward process. I'll videotape that as well. But there's the list of things to do. We've got a car now that is stuck in the garage for the rest of the year because I got a blown power steering line. So I guess you'll see videos coming from me now as we start working on the car. But until then, the car is done for the season. So that's it. Got a lot of things coming up, so hopefully you'll join me for those. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, and I'll see you again.